Hello and welcome back to Football Daily, where today we have 10 club takeovers that fell through. Let's go. 10. Murdoch and Man United. Manchester United may have been under the control of the Glazers for nearly 15 years now, but back in the 90s the club was hot property waiting to be snapped up. Having won 4 of the first 5 Premier Leagues, the Red Devils were benefiting the most from the exposure and riches on offer in the new era of subscription-based viewing, quickly becoming the world's most profitable football club. With this came fears that United and other big sides could break away from smaller Premier League outfits as their television rights became more valuable. The launch of MUTV in 1998 was an unprecedented move at the time, with ITV and Rupert Murdoch's Sky both buying significant shares in the channel. At the same time, Murdoch was preparing an offer United would struggle to refuse, and a fee of £623 million, the highest ever bid for a football club at the time, was agreed between the two parties. Everyone was seemingly a winner. Sky B, which already had the monopoly on Premier League television rights, was about to have control over the country's biggest club. CEO Martin Edwards saw his shares increase in value by the tens of millions overnight, and United were set to grow even stronger under the new ownership. But the takeover was met with huge protest, from fans to politicians, and the deal was eventually blocked by the Office of Fair Trading on the grounds of being anti-competitive. 9. Michael Knighton. Murdoch was no doubt disappointed by the failure to acquire Man United, but it was nothing compared to the humiliation of Michael Knighton's attempted takeover of the club 10 years earlier. The English businessman's £20 million bid, despite being over 20 times less than what Sky later offered, was also a record offer at the time, and it included an extra £10 million to help renovate an outdated Old Trafford. United were yet to experience real success under Alex Ferguson, and Knighton's big offer was matched by an ambition to return the club to its former glory on the pitch. Martin Edwards accepted, and Knighton subsequently announced the takeover on the first day of the 1989-90 season, as United took on champions Arsenal at Old Trafford. Before kick-off he took to the field in full kit, and even showed off his football skills, doing keepy-uppies in front of the Stretford end. But the agreement hadn't in fact been finalised, and Knighton's business partners pulled out, with reports at the time suggesting it had been a result of the unwanted attention brought on the deal by his bizarre publicity stunt. The takeover fell through, and Knighton would eventually end up owner of Carlisle in the 4th tier. And before we move on, if you're enjoying this video, please do subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell to never miss a video. 8. Dell and Sunderland. To say the last few years haven't been pretty for fans of Sunderland would be an understatement, so it's little surprise they got a bit too excited when Michael Dell, one of the world's richest billionaires, was linked with taking over the club in 2019, with many dreaming of a swift return to the Premier League, and our own Dougie Critchley even claiming his beloved club would be playing in the Champions League within 10 years. After suffering a double relegation, failing to get out of League One and prematurely losing star player Josh Maja, supporters were desperate for change, and owner Stuart Donald was already proving an unpopular figure, despite only being in charge for just over a year. So when Dell's name was associated with a takeover, it seemed too good to be true, and that's exactly what it was. The supposed interested party, MSD Capital, was an investment company run by 3 businessmen which deals directly with the money of the Dell family. However, while these businessmen were very much involved, it was a venture totally separate from their dealings with the computing giant. But Dell continued to be linked with the takeover by the tabloid media as a passive minority investor. Either way, the deal fell through, with Donald coming away with a £9 million loan. For what it's worth, Sunderland fans, you were never going to see Dell's billions anyway. 7. Make Rangers great again. Thanks to @Paramal for suggesting this one on Twitter. He may have become one of the most divisive political figures in our modern history, but Donald Trump has always split opinion in his ancestral home of Scotland. His decision to build a golf course on ancient conservation land in Balmedy in 2012 angered local residents and environmentalists alike, but his promise to create thousands of jobs got the project the approval it needed. But he could have become an even bigger menace. It was around this time that Rangers Football Club was on the brink of financial collapse, and Trump put himself forward as a potential lifesaver, keen to further strengthen his ties with the country of his mother's birth. Furthermore, the businessman was brought up by a Presbyterian, linking him with the religious history of the club, and had experience of sport club ownership, having run the New Jersey Generals American football team in the 1980s. But after learning the full extent of the Glasgow club's financial woes, Trump counted himself out, and the club went into administration at the end of the season. But that wasn't the last time the American flirted with the football world. While campaigning for the US presidency in 2015, he was linked with a $100 million takeover of Colombian outfit Atlético Nacional. the club once bankrolled by drug kingpin Pablo Escobar. 6. The Den Bosch Disaster. Thanks to Floyd on Twitter for suggesting this one. In July 2018, Dutch minnows FC Den Bosch were taken over by 24-year-old Georgian businessman Kaki Jordania, who promised to get them back to the Eredivisie after over a decade out of the top flight. The son of former Vitesse owner Merab Jordania, whose takeover of the top-tier side had been linked with Roman Abramovich, Kaki became the subject of routine background checks by the Dutch football authorities, but was allowed to go about making changes at Den Bosch while he did so, even signing his younger brother for the side the following January. And his investment was paying off. Den Bosch began the season as the dominant force in the division, finishing as winter champions and raising hopes of a first promotion since 2004. But by March 2019, Dutch newspaper NRC reported the KNVB had rejected the takeover due to money laundering risks, stemming from the prospective owner's links with the Russian oil industry. And then things turned sour. That summer, Jordania threatened to seize the near €1 million he had poured into the club, which would have left them on the brink of financial collapse. And at the time of writing, there is still the possibility of the club and its former investor going to court. 5. The Liverpool boy. It's everyone's dream to buy the club they grew up supporting, and in 2004, that looked like a real possibility for Liverpool-born Steve Morgan. The local construction tycoon was the third biggest shareholder at Anfield at the time, and with embattled chairman David Moores looking to sell, he saw an opportunity. But it would prove the beginning of the end of Morgan's association with his beloved club. The businessman, who had never made a secret of his desire to run the club, lodged a £70 million bid with Moores, and after a similarly valued deal with future Man City owner Thaksin Shinawatra fell through, his offer was also rejected. Increasingly desperate to broker an agreement, Morgan's wife even pleaded with the board to accept his offer, while reports suggested he felt he was being used as a stalking horse, while the club searched for a more desirable buyer. Morgan eventually gave up on his dream and instead bought Wolves in 2007. The same year, David Moores sold Liverpool to the controversial Gillett and Hicks. But fast forward to 2019, and the Reds are in a better financial shape than they've ever been under FSG, while Morgan's sale of Wolves to Fosun International in 2016 ushered in a glorious new era for the West Midlands club. 4. Gerard Pique and Notts County. The oldest professional club in the world, Notts County lost their status as the oldest league club after being relegated from League Two in 2019, an ordeal which coincided with the historic club coming to the brink of financial ruin, with players and staff going unpaid before being saved by the owners of analytics company Football Radar. And if you haven't already, why not check out the video we did on the club's recovery as part of our Journeymen series. But before Alexander and Christopher Reeds took over at Meadow Lane, a certain Gerard Pique was interested in buying the historic club. By this point, his Cosmos company had already agreed a long-term deal with the International Tennis Federation to run the Davis Cup, and also owned FC Andorra, who have climbed from the 5th tier to the 3rd tier of Spanish football since they took over in 2018. And Piqué was apparently attracted by the Pies' history and the potential to turn the club into a hotbed for homegrown talent. Alan Hardy, the owner at the time, even held talks with Piqué's company in London. But with the club's financial situation growing rapidly more severe, the Barcelona defender didn't have enough time to carry out due diligence checks on the club, and Hardy was forced to accept the offer from the Reeds brothers in order to stave off administration. Fans of Notts County were no doubt elated to see their club saved. But if things had worked out differently, they may have had a La Masia-style production line on their hands. 3. The Bury tragedy. Another crisis which we covered on the Journeymen series, Bury FC actually got promoted to League One in 2019, but in the toughest circumstances. Players and staff went unpaid for months on end, while controversial owner Steve Dale failed to find a buyer for the club, with the EFL threatening to expel them from the Football League if a deal could not be reached. As the summer rolled on, the situation became ever more grim, as fixtures were cancelled and the pressure from the authorities grew. Then, just as the club looked doomed for expulsion, a lifeline was thrown by sports consultancy firm CNN Sporting Risk, who apparently struck a deal with Dale at the 11th hour. But hope soon turned to tragedy, as the company realised the full extent of the debts racked up at the club over the preceding years and pulled out of the agreement. Bury were kicked out of the Football League, and suddenly supporters in the town had no team to watch for the first time in the club's 135-year history. But while Steve Dale still insists he can bring football back to Gig Lane, the fans have taken matters into their own hands, setting up a Phoenix club, Bury AFC, who is set to kick off life in the North West Counties League in the 2021 season. 2. Newcastle United. Speaking of controversial owners, Mike Ashley is without doubt the most notorious in English football. Not only has he drawn criticism from the football community for continually underfunding a club which was once one of the country's most ambitious and getting them relegated twice, but the poor working conditions faced by staff at his Sports Direct warehouses, of which one has been described as a gulag, make him an obvious enemy for the wider public. At the time of writing, the club could finally be rid of him, with a takeover headed by British businesswoman Amanda Staveley and backed by the Saudi royal family's public investment fund, currently being worked out. But Magpie fans know by now not to hold their breath, as multiple takeovers have fallen through during the Ashley years. In fact, there have been as many as 10. Less than 18 months after the billionaire's takeover in 2007, a Nigerian consortium reportedly offered £350 million for the club. But as the implications of the global financial crisis took hold, a deal never materialised. Meanwhile, Sheikh Mansour, who had taken over Man City by this time, later revealed he had initially been keen on buying Newcastle. Then in 2019, Mansour's cousin Sheikh Khalid had apparently reached an agreement to take over at St James's Park, only for the deal to collapse, with former Lyon coach Bruno Genesio later claiming he would have been hired by the club had it gone through. Magpie supporters were left disappointed once again, as Steve Bruce was named as the heir to Rafa Benitez instead. 1. The Milan Fiasco. So this takeover did actually happen, but its swift breakdown suggested it really should have never gone ahead in the first place. In April 2017, AC Milan was sold to Chinese businessman Li Yonghyong, ending Silvio Berlusconi's 31-year association with the Italian giants to the tune of €740 million. However, that sum involved high-interest loans of over €300 million from US hedge fund Elliott Management, and little was known about the prospective owner, aside from his claims of owning phosphorus mines back in China. Anonymous sources who had read the relevant documents at the time were amazed they had been signed off, while a hedge fund manager later approached to refinance Lee's debt called it uninvestable. By the end of the 2017-18 season, it was clear the project had failed, and Elliott Management had taken over the club by July, with the Rossoneri facing a 2-year ban from Europe for breaching FFP. Meanwhile, by the end of the year, reports had emerged that Lee had been blacklisted by the Chinese government and subsequently had his passport confiscated due to his unpaid debts. And that's all we have time for today, but if you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more great content. And finally, in these difficult times, please do remain indoors, wash your hands and stay safe. Bye for now.